Hi, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. And this is The Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast.
This podcast is all about taking action and creating that badass business abundance and life that you want.
Where we share stories, laughs, wins, and epic fails to show you the whole picture of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's not just unicorns and rainbows, people.
Jump on and follow us through this raw and witty roller coaster,
where we get down and dirty and go behind the scenes of life and entrepreneurship.
Get on it,
get over it,
and get after it.
Hey, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to The Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. It's been a while since it's just been the two of us.
It has.
And we are excited to be here today, as always, to talk about business. And specifically today, we're talking about something that has come up a lot in our own personal conversations and business conversations. I would say just in the last, 2 months? Well, forever. But specifically for me, it's been coming up a lot in the last 2 or 3 months. What about for you?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It has been coming up. It feels like my whole life. However, and we'll talk about that. We're keeping you on your edge of your seat. We know this. But yeah, definitely over the last couple of months. So I'm going to let Amanda say the official title first, because this was like a whole debate before we started this podcast, because like there's so many different facets to this. So go ahead, Amanda, break it down. What are
the official title that we had come up with, because there are so many facets to this, are speed work, and we'll get into a little bit much about what we call speed work, but that is this misconception of efficiency, productivity, and this quick succession implementation, specifically of your work. Now, that's a lot of words in a small scape there. So what we mean by speed work is the speed at which you implement the work that you do. For some people, it happens very quickly. For some, it takes a lot longer to process and to work through things. For some, it's a mix. Actually, I would argue that for most people, it's a mix. However, this theme has been coming up for Lynn and myself pretty much our entire lives. I know that Lynn has a couple of specific examples. I have a couple of specific examples, but the thing that has really stood out to me in the last couple of months is our second book came out. And one of the largest comments we've heard is like, didn't you just publish a book? Like, well, I thought you started a podcast. Like, already? Who? So there's a lot of that question of like, how, they're like, is it a real book or like a 5-page ebook? Like, how did you get a whole second book out that was longer than the first one, publish it out into the world in less time than it takes to make a human child? So
fact.
I've heard a lot about that. We've heard a lot about that in the last several months, for sure.
We have. And here's the thing, for those of you that are listening to this and maybe have said this to us, we're not pointing fingers. Like, we completely understand. And it's definitely something that, like Amanda said, we both have dealt with in our own ways, pretty much since I can remember. And I've had some pretty big realizations over the last couple of weeks because of all of the comments, and it brought up definitely some old stories, but we want to talk about a couple of points here. One of which we want to start with, just because some people work at a higher speed does not mean that the quality of work is lessened, right? So some people, and Amanda and I both are fit in a lot in these categories. We're quick-witted. We think very quickly. We take action very fast. Like, we clear out and hyper focus on things. Whenever you're listening to this, I literally just came down to an island to write my personal book for 1 week. And I was telling Amanda, I'm like, I'm going to get at least 75% done, but I'd like 100% done in 7 days. 50,000 words. And at the end of the day, it's because we know how to prepare. It doesn't mean that we weren't prepared prior to that. And we just know how to execute differently than maybe people who take a little bit more time, who take a little bit more thought. And again, neither one is wrong or right. It's more about the commenting, and some of it is a bit begrudgingly and almost like judgy. I mean, what do you think, Amanda?
Yes. And that's actually what we want to kind of dispel here is that we're not pointing fingers. We're not saying like our way is better, like we are better because we're faster. That's not it. Or that we don't care about the subject because we can get it done faster, or that it's not the right quality. What we're saying instead is that depending on how you process, depending on how quickly you make decisions, depending on how quickly you put those decisions into action and what the outcome of those actions is or are, depending on the situation, there's a lot that goes into that. And because Lynn and I are quick to, in most of the things that we do, we as she said, we make all those decisions quickly. We make all the actions quickly. We also are used to preparing in a way that the outcome is still the same. Even if you took us and you made us do the exact same project and you said, okay, you need to spend 16 weeks on this. The outcome, the finished result would be the same in 16 weeks as it would be in like 6 days for the most part, because the amount of work what we're putting in, it's still going to be succinct, even if you give us more time to do it. So like, I always think back to like those old college, like, oh, you have the entire semester to get this paper done. And I might not start it until like one day before it's due.
That's why I was just cracking up because I was like, because both of us are waiting till the last damn minute to do it.
Because we know it's not going to take us 6 months to get it done, not because we're procrastinating, but because we're preparing other ways, we're doing other things, we're multitasking, we are
hyper-focusing,
we're exploring. So yeah, I'm to an outside viewer, it might seem like, oh, well, you're just procrastinating. You're not doing it till the last second. Like, well, no. I mean, well, yes, college. There are a lot of things that happen then. However, doing it at the last minute wasn't because of a procrastination tactic. It was doing it because I knew it could be just as well written in 48 hours as it would be written if I had researched it all 6 months. And I was still doing the research and getting prepared. But when I sat down to write, I'd already done the research. I'd already thought about it. I already knew the outline. I knew what was going to happen. So it didn't take me long to put it into execution because I'd already thought it out. So, there's that give and take of how much it takes someone to do something. So because I had friends in the same class who were arguably smarter than me, I would say very much so smarter than me, but it took them the full 6 months because the way they process, the way they write, the way they thought about a project, the way they prepared for things, it took them longer. And they were a more traditional student than I was because we just worked differently, but they were absolutely smarter than me in 1,000 ways. I mean, we could end the class with the same grade. However, they were a little bit bitter when I wrote that paper. Like, you're never going to get it done in 2 days. So like, watch me. And I'm not going to say I didn't spend all night and eat like a cup of noodles in the computer lab, but it still got done.
Yeah. There's a couple of things here. And actually one thing that just came up too, that maybe we need to sideline and kind of chat about is like what that is rooted in. And I know for me, like I work really well under pressure. Like I've always been that person. And I know that that's rooted in like my abusive past and like having to like make sure everything was done and like being able to like do different things. And it's interesting that that's really coming up. And also, yeah, some of it is a bit procrastination, but it's also that you said something key that I want to make sure that people hear is that you thought it in your mind. Like, it's not like you didn't like live with it. And the way that we process, and even for me, and, we've joked about this and I've told other people is like, this book has been living in me my whole life, obviously, since it's about this particular book that I'm about to write is about my life and about different situations. However, about a year ago, little less than a year ago, I literally started hearing the audible noise from the outside, like speaking to me. And so like, I've been mapping this out. I did our same process that we did for our book as well, where I data dumped and did different things. However, I've been mapping it and doing it in my mind and in my soul and like unraveling it since I knew like, okay, this was the year. Right. And so at the end of the day, like everybody has a different process and everybody does things differently. And just, with that being said, it doesn't it doesn't mean it's less quality. And that's kind of something I think why we're talking about it today versus a sales one. We are putting this in the middle of all of our sales promotions, because I think it's really important for us to honor people for what they are and who they are and how they show up, because it's a bit hurtful for people to, one, feel like that book is not as good as the first book, because really, we didn't take that much time to write that book either. I mean, in the big scheme of things, we were learning and navigating different things, but just because we work quicker. And I want to give a quick story of, I was on my drive down to the island. I was thinking about like a story of when I first graduated high school. I had my beautician's license, my cosmetology license. And one of the first jobs that I had outside, it was in a salon. And I remember, because the way we learned, and because of the way that I am, but because I learned at the group home, the boarding school, Mooseheart, like we literally cut all the kids' hair because they didn't go out. We didn't bring people in. Like they had a cosmetology and a barber school inside, so we can cut the 200 plus kids and the teacher's hair. So we had to be quick, right? We had to like burn them and churn them, like get them out, right? Flip those tables. And so I cut this guy's hair, and it was probably about 15 minutes. And he about had a coronary. Like, he's like, oh my God, like it can't be good. Why did you take, like, you didn't take that long? And I remember like, I double checked it. My manager came over and double checked it, assured him like, this is like a perfect cut. And he was so pissed when he left because I didn't take the time. Now, I appreciate, in retrospect, like I appreciate that people want to, and this is true with like some of my relationships. Like I'm a definitely, let's get it done, let's move forward. Like that's the personality that Amanda and I definitely have. And I see where that bleeds over into my personal side as well. And I'm not saying that that's the healthiest at all times. However, there should be some give and take. Like if you like to take your time, thinking of like my ex-husband, mind you, I'm a little taller than him, just by like maybe a half an inch or an inch, but like I walk fast. I naturally walk fast, and he would walk slow, and he'd be like, just slow down. I'm like, just speed up just a little. And like, I think there's this like give and take. However, we should not be judging people or judging the product based on the amount of time that they used in order to produce it. And I think that that's just something that we need to really be mindful of moving forward.
Absolutely. And I think this comes down to the way I like to see it. And granted, I'm one of those people who does things fast. However, if you were being paid to cut hair and it took you 15 minutes and then took the person next to you an hour, both cuts could be perfect. In the end, it's important that you judge based on the final product, not on the amount of time it took. So maybe the person sitting next to you took an hour to cut that hair. It's their first haircut, so they're really working on it. And you've been cutting hair for 50 years. So your expertise makes it happen faster in some ways because you've already thought it out. You've already gone through the steps. You've already gone through the education. And so you're not really paying for the time. You're paying for that expertise and the overall outcome that happens. And it reminds me of this quote. I'm sure it's some meme or like internet voiceover that I heard, so I can't even place it's not an exact quote. But it's, this man runs into Picasso at a cafe in Paris, and he goes, "Oh, why don't you make me a sketch?" And so Picasso sketches on a napkin this thing and gives it to him. Okay, that'll be $100,000. The guy's like, "How can you charge me $100,000 for the sketch that took you 5 minutes?" He's like, "That sketch didn't take me 5 minutes. It took me 50 years of doing art, building my name, building my reputation, being good at it. It's a good sketch. Look at the sketch. It's an amazing sketch. $100,000. So that kind of thing comes up to me sometimes in this, and I'm not saying that our work is infinitely better. And so if it takes me 1 minute or if it takes me 1,000 minutes. Yeah, I'm not saying the Picasso of the business world. Absolutely not what I'm saying. If anything, it'd be the Van Gogh. Just kidding. No, well, just kidding. True. The point is that it really, your work should be really thought of on the merit of it, not on necessarily the time or how much money you spent on it. And that goes both ways. If you work so long on the project and you're working for 6, 12, 2 years, and it's amazing. Does it really matter that it took 2 years? I mean, maybe to your client who was expecting in 6 weeks, but overall, the important thing is the end product. And for me anyway, is are you producing quality? Are you working with your heart and soul? Are you getting out in the world what it is that needs to be done and needs to be released, rather than just putting a time limit on what that is? Either direction. It doesn't have to take forever and it doesn't have to be instant. Because I think you can have quality and be both. You can be the kind of person who takes longer to work on something or who goes faster, but either way, it's about the quality of the work, not necessarily the length of time it took.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a couple of things I do want to unpack there. Is like going back to the poor man who had a coronary, like because I cut so quick. I understand now in retrospect that it was about the experience and not about the end product, right? And so there are some situations where it's more about the experience than the end product. As far as like definitely it is the results of the after effect that we shouldn't coming out of that for like our book or project or whatever. Like it is, regardless, like Amanda said, regardless if it took 2 days or 2 years, I mean, that does matter in other aspects, but as far as the quality of work, that should not matter. Because you don't know what prep work has been done or whatnot around that. And with that being said, I do have to say this because I know that this could sound contradictory to some of the things that we say about time worth value and time does matter. And if you have timelines and be productive and efficient and effective, we're still saying all of that. I guess what we're getting to at the point of this particular podcast is one, like, everybody works at different speeds. Everybody's implementation is different. It does not necessarily mean that product, that end service is worse or better than someone who might have taken less time or more time. And just to really like, also on top of that, like really watch how you're reacting in that. And I have to do this from someone who takes a long time to do things. And because I have disc experience and understand behavioral styles, like there are times, even like with, I was talking about my ex-husband, like I would slow down before he would actually like have those triggers, because I knew his like little like nuances when he was getting annoyed that I was walking too fast. And I would try to slow down prior because I was trying to meet him both ways. Right. And so like understanding that, you know, especially when there's multiple people in the mix, that you are conscious of that. But also like, you know, you don't have, I guess, and Amanda keeps saying this, like it's both sides of the coin. Like you don't have to wait till the last minute and do everything under pressure. And you don't have to take 15 years to complete X, right? So there's your own speed of implementation. There's your own speed of action. There's your own way that you think of things. And it's funny because I was thinking of actually our first book. I think it was the first chapter, if I remember, You Got This, and how like, the way I think, and I know Amanda's like this too, is like, or don't think, like I do trust my instincts. I do trust my gut. And I think some people who lean more into that might be a bit quicker in creation of things. But also like I trust that the next step is going to be there. And I just dive in and I'm a doer. And so like when I was like climbing down that damn waterfall and like just not even thinking and putting one foot in front of the other, my friend at the end was like, holy crap, like, you know, you were a pro. And the thing is like I extracted everything that didn't serve me in that moment, kind of like me coming down here to write this book. I canceled almost everything on my docket, so that way I can hyper focus. I extract everything, and this is how we do things. So it's not that we're just throwing shit together. And I think that that's why we wanted to kind of have this, and not to like be jerks about it, and to really recognize like we're not just throwing shit together. Like we put a lot of work into this and we put a lot of effort into what we do. And just because we're quicker in implementation does not mean that end product is, you know, of not of value. Or like, and on the other side, it doesn't make it more exceptional either, in my opinion. Like it is what it is.
No, and I'm glad you said that, because we've said this. I think I'm not 99% sure that we actually said it in the book and not just in talking about the book, the first book, is we're not special. Like we don't consider ourselves to be special. And some people that I have spoken to, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could never write one book, let alone two, and certainly not in 9 months. And Lynn and I just have this feeling of we're not special in our ability to do that. It just happened that we set ourselves up for it. We prepared literally for the last 20 years to write these books. Like we had written these books in our heads and had been talking about it for years. So we had already set ourselves up for that success. And as you said, you're taking out all the extra distractions and things that will hinder you from making those decisions. And for me, it often manifested as being a risk taker. But people were, oh my God, you're just a risk taker. You're so adventurous. Like that's such a risky decision. I'm like, well, it wasn't to me, because I just trusted that the next thing would happen. And yeah, it could be a horrible thing. There could be something horrible that happens, but you're not your circumstances. So I'm sure that I can trust my gut and instinct to get me out of that if that arose. So it's that constant feeling like what's coming. And even if you're just, bull in a china shop barreling through, like, I'm going to get it done, you trust that there'll be something there. Like, there'll be a cleanup crew. Even if I have to hire them myself, even if I have to do the cleaning up myself, there'll be a crew there. So there's trusting yourself there makes a big difference. And we don't consider ourselves to be exceptional. And we don't consider it to be this amazing, and not to say it's not an amazing accomplishment, because we are proud of our accomplishments, but we don't consider ourselves to be any better than any other person because we work at the timeline that we work at.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, here's the other side of it that we want to talk about before, because the time's already coming to an end, is that either way, if you're a more reserved worker or processor, thinker, applier, and or if you're really quick and fast, like Amanda and I, there can be fallout. Okay. So kind of like that guy reacted in the salon. Also, like, people feel like there's not as much value in the second one, that we are we're diluting. We're also possibly diluting what we're doing, right? That we're overwhelming our audience. And this is a conversation. This is real talk. This is a conversation Amanda and I have behind the scenes all the time. And so we actually scaled back. We will probably, as of now, although I wanted to release 3 books underneath the Pursuit of Badasserie in 2023, we will probably only release 2, just because we have realized that, and we're prepared actually to write the other 2. We'll start writing the second book for this year, which will be our 3rd book underneath the brand, in a couple of months. And at the end of the day, we realize, like, oh, our audience overall is feeling a bit overwhelmed. And so there is this interesting, like, dynamic that we have to be mindful of as business owners. Now, if you take it from the other side, and I am only hypothetically speaking, because I typically work quicker. If you're one who takes longer in projects, and I've worked with individuals like this and need a lot of information and data and just a lot of time, and I'm thinking of a few in particular, then people feel like you are, especially if it's like per hour or whatever, that you are just milking them, right? And that you're not necessarily actually focusing, and you're not being, you're not, you might be putting in a lot of effort, but that it's messy behind the scenes, or that it's just too much from a time stance needed, right? So just being mindful of, like, regardless which position, like, you play, there is going to be fallout, and you have to make the best decision for the way that you work and the type of clients that you're attracting, and really find that harmony, that balance in your productivity, or your output, I should say, and the time that you output it in. Because if you're someone who's more reserved and need lots of time to take care of things and get stuff done, then a certain clientele is not going to be your target audience, and vice versa. With us who think really quickly, like we typically don't work with individuals who need a lot of time to get things done, just because it's too stagnant for us. We feel too slow, right? So at the end of the day, you have to find that in your own, and just know that your time orientation, I can't even remember what we called this podcast, but like your productivity, your time orientation, your time of implementation, your time of action, the way you do things is affecting the results that you're receiving. Just be aware of that.
Yes. And I think a really brilliant example of this, it's brilliant in my mind, is years ago when I was a television producer, I was a salaried employee, and yet we billed our clients on the hour for the work done. And, just as like an open discussion of how like people perceive your time. And so, okay, if I'm getting paid $125 as a USD, as a video production editor, and $75 as the producer, it's really when a client comes in line item and it's like, the producer spent like 6,000 hours on this and the editor only spent 3. Like what? Wow, what was it? Or conversely, when I was first learning to be an editor, it may have taken me 10 hours to edit a piece, but I wasn't going to bill my client for that because I was slow, not because the project couldn't have been done faster. And so there's some of that recognizing where your faults are and how much time you are spending on something. And this is, we've talked about some time with value. Like you might have to adjust your expectations of the time it takes or the amount of money it takes to do that project or anything around those lines based on real time versus perceived time versus what you think the client is willing to pay for that. And so that really does trickle down into your time with value as well. And so all this perceived time, how long it actually takes you, how long, like what you actually bill a client, all that kind of comes together and how you charge for things and how your work is perceived. And as Lynn was saying in her haircut experience, that one was, in hindsight, it wasn't about the speed and the quality of her work. It was about the experience they were looking for. And so as you're building your time and you're thinking about how long it takes you to do something, take that into consideration. Are people expecting a timeline and a journey, or do they just want it done and want it done yesterday? And that could affect how you talk about your work and the speed of your work and describe yourself when you're just marketing yourself as in general.
Absolutely. When you were talking, actually, I was thinking about like with the security company, and this will be the last story, and I know we need to wrap up, but like we went from we floated between some jobs we did, like we paid the techs by the job just because it was, and I have a construction company that's kind of like this too, where they get paid for the whole job versus an hourly and vice versa. And if you're getting paid for the whole job, let's say you get $1,000 to get this job completed, whereas maybe you get paid, we'll say $100 an hour just makes it easy for me. So that'd be 10 hours. So that would be equal, right? So 10 hours would equal 1,000, etc. But if you get paid by the job and it's $1,000, you might try to get that job done a bit quicker. So that way you're making $150 an hour. So maybe you're getting that job done in 5 hours. Now that's not cutting corners. That's not, messing around, versus people who get paid hourly, right? They might take their time and then end up taking 15 hours. And so, I guess also like watch your intention behind like how you're doing things and like what is like kind of the mindset behind it. Like, are you trying to milk it? Or are you trying to like actually improve and like, bigger bang for your buck type of thing, but also like not cutting corners. So there's all these different dynamics that can go with each example that we're talking about, that we're speaking about. At the end of the day, just keep in mind, like, watch your own judgment when it comes to, I'm not saying don't ask questions, don't do the checks and balances, but watch your own judgment when it comes to how you project of like what you think something should take versus what it actually took. And again, going back to the security, like I had an idea of how much a job would take. Even with our VAs, we have an idea of like how long it takes Amanda and I. We don't expect our VA to get something done that Amanda and I would take 30 minutes. We usually give them about an hour and a half, right? Because we know the way that we work. And so at the end of the day, just know that everybody works at different speeds. It doesn't make the quality of the business or the end product different. It can, but it doesn't have to. And just because you don't work at that speed, either slower or faster, just watch how you're feeling in that and why. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't expect you to have standards. That doesn't mean that we don't expect you to like compromise your whole belief. However, just kind of watch that in the future, because it is interesting. Make the adjustments where you need to make the adjustments internally and externally, because not everybody's cut from the same cloth.
100%. We are all our own people. We all work and process and create at different speeds. And overall, I think what we were hoping to get or to relay in this podcast today is that it's okay to be any of those things, as long as it's the intention behind it, and it's the action behind it, and it's the quality behind it, not necessarily the judgment behind it.
Absolutely. Perfect ending, my babe. All right. So thanks for watching or listening. Subscribe, send this to somebody who needs to hear this.
All right, and get after it.
All right, everyone. It's not enough to just listen.
Now you've got to put it into action.
We are so excited to see what you do next.
If you enjoyed our show, please leave us a review on iTunes.
And to find out more about what we're doing, visit us at thepursuitofbadasserie.com.